What are we getting from your service that we are not getting elsewhere?
Profitability is the end of everything.
So that's where we're focused. And so that's a value add of saying, okay, because we're entrepreneurs, we realize at the end of the day, profitability matters.
Correct. A good entrepreneur would really appreciate that because you know, not running out of money is pretty important, especially when it's your money. Do you want to do this? Do you even understand what it is that you are getting yourself into? If they're offended by that, they're going to be way more offended after they're $500,000 into a major project and then realize that it's not going to work. You want the people who really have the knowledge in there speccing out exactly what needs to happen up front.
Just from the get-go,
right?
The cost associated with working the way that we do are lower than you're going to find in the market.
Everyone is in the software business. You know, when we get to like our ultimate cost of software development, I think on average right now when we do a quote all in, it's like $80 an hour. And that's a third of what everybody else out there is.
The learning curve is so steep with software development.
Yeah. They don't understand all the different roadblocks and the different expenses.
And usually that forethought from an entrepreneurial perspective is not present. So that's 6 weeks. Not only do you lose the time value of that 6 weeks, but you lose all the monetary value and the development fees associated with that 6 weeks because no one was thinking with experience, because you only learn this through experience.
Correct.
No one was thinking, all right, where are the pitfalls that are coming up and how do we avoid that up front?
Well, how do you know that you know how to do it? Well, you look around, all right? We've been able to develop extremely efficient software that makes us quite profitable.
So that's the thing, is that we've been doing software development and we've done it for years. We've created multiple products on our side that are successful.
Yeah.
And really, like you said, the learning curve is so steep with software development.
Yeah.
For any individual to know every single aspect is nearly impossible. So you have to build the good team that you referenced.
Right.
And so you bring in several individuals with certain level of expertise who, and most of the time they have certain personality traits.
Right.
And then there's a development and a skill set to actually having communications between these individuals.
Totally.
Because they communicate in different styles.
And then there's where you're going to get the stuff done. Because a lot of people will go, well, I'm just going to go to the Ukraine, or I'm going to go to India, or I'm just going to go to Canada, or I'm going to go all of these things. None of them are necessarily wrong decisions. It depends on a lot of things. It depends on everything you have going on. But they absolutely impact what happens after that. Talking to someone not too long ago, they had developed a product using a very expensive development team. They went broke. And so what they ended up trying to build never even hit the open market because the cost of the developers, like they just ran out of money because you always run into things that you didn't necessarily anticipate. Now, as you know, like when we started Sky, it was very expensive. Like we started looking at, we had a thriving ACA reporting company. We were doing some things uniquely to get that done, but that was not going to be scalable. It was not web-based. It was more of a localized-based software. And so to develop software was going to require a whole new set of skills. And as you remember, we started getting quotes, and we were looking at getting that done in the United States. That's expensive. That's $200 and something. And quite frankly, that's just something that we weren't that wasn't a cost that we were willing to end up paying for. It was just way too much. And so what we did is obviously we had to come up with a different way of doing something. So what do? You experiment. And so some people will go, well, I'm just going to take everything and then push it overseas. That also has its issues, especially if you're dealing with, depends on what kind of information you're dealing with. Are you dealing with sensitive information? You're going to let them deal with your sensitive information? You got to be careful with that. And so obviously, as you well know, we ended up landing on a quasi approach that does certain things in the United States and certain things in other countries, which gets our cost of development way low, which I think is important because not running out of money is pretty important, especially when it's your money.
Well, let's talk about that. So I've had the opportunity to sit down with people who are business owners, entrepreneurs, and I think that's a big value add that we add. The fact that we are business owners, entrepreneurs that have software. We have software as a service that we use daily.
Right.
It pays for all of my bills, pays all your bills.
Yeah, I mean, it's made us very well.
So we're in the trenches with this. Right. So we have that going into it. But
see, that in and of itself is so different. I mean, because most people, like if you're developing software for something, they don't care. We do care because, I mean, we know, and that there's been opportunities that we've had to develop stuff that we're like, we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
And they go, why? Because it's not going to work.
Well,
let me look at us.
Let me ask you the question, and I think that's part of it. One of the questions we get from entrepreneurs that come to us and say, hey, we have this idea. We need a piece of software. You know, all these entrepreneurs, including us, have these great ideas. We're going to conquer the world. We're going to change an entire industry, all those sorts of things.
Right.
But one of the questions that we get is, what are we getting from your service that we are not getting elsewhere?
Well, that in and of itself has got a little bit loaded into it. Like for a lot of the people that have in their mind that they really want to develop software, I even would kind of take a step back that before we even start talking about what's the difference between our service and somebody else's service is really fundamentally, do you want to do this? Do you even understand what it is that you are getting yourself into? And do you understand the financial commitment? I think that's really important because if you're someone who's just selling software, yeah, sure, whatever you want. But they're really not helping that person unless that person has a lot of skill. If they're like we were, they don't understand what they're getting into. They don't understand all the different roadblocks and the different expenses. I mean, there's very commonly we'll tell people, we'll talk about development and one thing, and then we'll say, okay, well then you have to do ongoing testing, like what's called static and dynamic testing of the software to make sure that you're hacking it before a hacker hacks it, and that costs this. And then you're going to have someone ongoing just on the piece of software if it's web-based to make sure that you're keeping everything up to date, that you're working on bugs and everything. And they're like, wow, just ongoing? Yeah, just ongoing. Yes, it's expensive. And so even after you get everything done, you're going to, that's what software is. You're going to have ongoing expenses. A lot of people don't even know that. And so I think one of the first things, in our process we do is we a lot of people will say discovery, but we always throw in the debate. Which is, I'm going to try to talk you out of this.
Say that again. Debate. So someone's going to come to us and say, we want to give you money to develop this product. And we're going to say, can I talk you out of it?
Yes.
All right. Tell me why. Why would we do that?
Well, because frankly, we don't have the time to be associated with something that sucks and it's going to fail.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, to be very honest.
Right.
And there's a lot of stuff out there just because it's my idea. I mean, my ideas, I think out loud. Most of my ideas are terrible. But I have a lot of them, so occasionally I run into a good one.
If you have enough.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And so, and a good entrepreneur would really appreciate that. Some people get offended by it, and that's okay. And if they're offended by that, they're going to be way more offended after they're $500,000 into a major project and then realize that it's not going to work. They're not going to be able to land where they want to land.
So because of the entrepreneurial background, there are strong opinions in saying, hey, look, this is probably not going to work. So let's debate as to why it should work. And the effort here on the part of Sky isn't necessarily to say, we don't want your business. It's to try to really troubleshoot and go through and say, what are the reasons for not doing this? Because when you have these big visions, it can be blinding sometimes. You're going to say, this is going to work for all these reasons, but we're not contemplating why it might not work.
That's right.
And we may be saving the person, right, like you said, $500,000 you're in and you realize this is not going to work.
Right.
Or there was an alternative solution that didn't even require a software
That's
build.
exactly right.
Okay.
That's where I was going to go as far as step 2. And step 2 is, prototyping as well as thinking about, do you want web-based software? You can develop software to solve a problem, to solve an internal business problem, to solve whatever, and it not be web-based. Whenever you decide you're going to go web-based, you start to bring in a lot more expenses for servers and data and people ongoing shooting and troubleshooting with bugs, user experience, because you got to think, when are your users going to be using this? And then depending upon, are there fees associated with that you might have depending upon your solution that are more royalty fees? There's a lot of stuff to think about. And my preference is, if you can do it, people underestimate Excel,
right?
Which sounds ridiculous. Excel, yes, people vastly underestimate Excel. And there's a lot of stuff that you can do in Excel, as we have known. There's lots of functions that we have done and built as an organization internally to be able to do things in Excel that would boggle people's minds. And we did it for $20,000 when it otherwise, if we'd done a web base, it'd have been $500,000. And so that's kind of that next step that we go, okay, all right, you got a really good idea. Yeah, we agree with you. And then, is there a different way to accomplish that? Is there a cheaper way to accomplish that? Because again, everything we've done we fund it with our own money. I mean, so we've had to learn that, when we get to like our ultimate cost of software development, I think on average right now, when we do a quote all in, it's like $80 an hour. And that's a third of what everybody else out there is.
Yeah.
Or at least half. I mean, no one's coming in at, that we see at least, under about $200 an hour.
And so it kind of goes back to that adage that you say all the time, where everything's a nail to he who hath a hammer, that kind of thing. And exactly. So since this isn't, we're not approaching this as, okay, software is the solution to everything, and just because you came through the door, let's go build some software.
Correct. Profitability is the end of everything.
So that's where we're focused. And so that's a value add of saying, okay, because we're entrepreneurs, we realize at the end of the day, profitability matters.
Correct. And I mean, honestly, as you well know, there's a lot of these conversations that we end up having depending upon the right circumstances, to where we'll take less fees and take an ownership in the company. And so it's really important to us to make sure it's aligned. And I guess that's probably some of the reason as to how we, it's just the whole idea that I don't want to create something that's you just own, that I wouldn't want to own.
Yeah, so if that's the structure, then you might have a good idea in our minds when we say, hey, can we own a part of this for reduced cost? Yeah.
Correct.
So that's another way to kind of reduce the costs going in. So you're saying, all right, already, just from the get-go, the cost associated with working the way that we do are lower than you're going to find in the market. Mm-hmm. They may be even lower depending on how flexible we are with a partnership and all of those sorts of things.
Right. I'll tell you one thing that I don't know if you're going to ask this or not, that people don't understand. They absolutely don't understand. So we've made it through. We've talked about the idea, some, depending upon the size of the idea is going to determine how long we could dedicate time to do that. Quite frankly, when you take me and you and other people in the room, it's not cheap. We did a session not too long ago with a potential client, and we added up and we did the session for free. But our internal costs, like what it cost, it probably cost us $5,000 to $10,000 with the amount of people, just the labor that we had in there. We didn't charge them for that. But one of the things people don't understand is that once you get past the initial, okay, we're talking about your idea, Trent, this idea that you want to develop. We can't talk you out of it. You think it's a good idea. And we've begun to kind of set the stage as to what you might be looking at, okay? What it might cost, how long it might take. All right, so just imagine that conversation was about building a house. And you said, I really want a 2-story house. And we go, you sure you want a house? Have you seen these tiny houses? Maybe you want these tiny houses. And you go, no, I really want a house. And we said, you sure you want 2 stories? And you go, yeah, I want 2 stories with a porch. We go, are you sure you really need a porch? Because there's people trip on porches and everything, and there's just going to be more. Okay, so that's what you want. So we get there, and they'll instantly look at us and go, how long is it going to take? How much is it going to cost? That totally depends. All we have said is you want a house. I mean, there are houses that are 2 stories that cost, $75,000. They're the same ones that cost $75 million. Yeah, so it just depends. You have to go that next step about speccing it out. And this is the thing people don't understand. No organization is going to do that for free. This is your vision that we're trying to turn into reality. And so very commonly people go, wait a minute. Like we should share in that risk. It's like, no, we're not taking risks. We're almost like in a consultant or an accountant. We start getting paid then when we start. And I think people really miss that. They don't understand that's really when the project kind of starts. And frankly, it's even more expensive up front because of you want the people who really have the knowledge in there speccing out exactly what needs to happen up front.
Yeah, and just to be clear, that conversation where we're saying, okay, you want a house, are you sure you don't want a 2-story house? It's not an effort of ours to diminish the scope of the project. No. It's just a matter, if we can talk you out of it, you probably shouldn't have been doing it if we can talk you out of it.
I'd rather talk you out of it now than 6 months from now.
Exactly
when you look at me and you go, how come you didn't tell me this? Because I'm going to tell them up front is, we're going to start going down this road, and there's a lot of things that are going to happen that we didn't see coming.
Yeah, and I'm glad you touched on the time, because that's the other really popular question I got is, well, okay, we've decided to do business together.
Sure.
How long is this going to take? Because I'm already behind. Everyone feels behind, especially if you're an entrepreneur. You're behind every day.
Totally.
So I'm already behind on my software build.
Totally.
I've had a bad experience building software with this other vendor.
Right.
I have a partially built piece of software. You can already start to see the complexity coming in.
Right.
How long is this going to take?
Yes.
And you say that depends. What does that depend on?
Yeah, it depends on everything. It depends on, number one, what is it that you want? Where is it that, the first thing we'd have to do is we'd have to take a lot of time to fully design exactly where it is that you want to go. So let's just say that, you're sitting here and we're talking and you go, I'm so far behind on going on vacation. I've got to go on vacation. And I go, okay. And you said, well, all right, we figure out you're going to drive. And you go, how long is it going to take me to get there? That entirely depends on where it is that you want to go. All right. Now, if you can describe to me in ridiculous detail that you want to go to Quebec, Canada, I can tell you how long it's going to take you. But until we figure out that it's Quebec, Canada, I'm lying to you if I tell you how long it's going to take, because it might just be right around the corner. It might be, we might be talking about planes, trains, and automobiles. We don't know until we define that. The other thing is that if we're talking about a project that you already have this existing, we have to identify where you are. And I don't know that either, because if we're talking about your vacation, say you're calling me on the phone and you say, listen, I'm trying to, I'm behind. It's time to go on vacation. And I say, well, where do you want to go? You go, I don't know yet. Exactly. And I go, okay, well, where are you calling from? I don't know that either. Okay, now we're really screwed, right? As far as, okay, we got a lot of work we have to do, because we have to identify where you are and where it is that you want to go. And that's hard work in excruciating detail, because everything is about these little small details. Like, for instance, you might build an application that has certain types of users. Ran into this one not too long ago. And there are people that in an industry where there's multiple people that end up accessing certain clients. Okay. So you can just imagine that you have like a distributor, and then you have your clients. Well, the distributor might have lots of different clients, but you didn't design the application for them to be able to actually see all of the clients. You only built it for the client user. Okay. You have a problem. Okay. You've got to back up from that, because that's a structural component. So oops on that's 6 weeks. That oops just cost you 6 weeks. That oops just cost you $20,000, $30,000 of not knowing that up ahead of time. It would have cost you half that or less. It could have probably flowed right into the stream of how you did things if you knew it ahead of time.
And that's what we see with individuals, and not trying to say anything negative towards anyone, but entrepreneur sits with a software developer, software engineer, says, this is what it is, here are the specs, and they get started. And usually that forethought from an entrepreneurial perspective is not present. So that's 6 weeks. Not only do you lose the time value of that 6 weeks, but you lose all the monetary value and the development fees associated with that 6 weeks, because no one was thinking with experience, because you only learn this through experience.
Correct.
No one was thinking, all right, where are the pitfalls that are coming up, and how do we avoid that up front?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And you've just got to be, again, it's like, and some of the things are just understanding you're walking into an unknown. That a lot of it is like if you're walking into like a cave to where you have a lantern where you can only see 2 feet around you. If you want to see what's 4 feet ahead, you have to take 2 steps.
Yeah.
And you just don't know. Now, experience will teach you when you're about to go off of a cliff, which we have done, or you go to the back of a cul-de-sac and you go, well, that doesn't work. That specifically with self-insured reporting, we did that a bunch when we were building out the analytics piece of it, which was a new thing, that I had never done before. We ended up spending a lot of money, and then fully getting to a solution that would be great, but it wasn't HIPAA compliant. It's like, oh man, can't use that one.
Right. And then getting the users on actually can teach you a lot as well. And
yes.
We did all that. So we have a question that came in, and I think this is a pretty good question. I'm just going to read it to you.
Sure.
So this question says, most of the software companies I have seen do not focus much on software security and security vulnerabilities. They rely on the clients to do this, and they don't incorporate it into their software development process. If they ever suggest to a client that vulnerabilities need to be handled, they tell the client only after the software is already in production and already exposed to security vulnerabilities.
All right. This is definitely somebody who probably works in software development, I guess, or IT.
Or has had an experience with.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So most of the people that we end up having the initial conversations with, that question just just right over their head. They're not even thinking about that. But it is a good point in that, like security, we've had multiple situations to where we talk with someone that they have certain types of applications. They don't even fully understand the security of it. That's just something that we haven't ever had that luxury, because everything we've ever dealt with was protected health information, that was very sensitive data. You've got to have encryption. You've got to, in transit, at rest, you've got a lot of moving parts and pieces. But yeah, it's a critical thing to be talking about, and it should be handled along with just talking about how, when you're about to deploy the software, it's kind of like you build the software, right? And you're testing it. It's not live. But when you go to push it out to where people can actually use it so the world can access it on the web, you have to break it and hack it before everybody else does. Because if you're storing stuff, just think about an Excel spreadsheet. I think simplistically, right? So all this stuff comes in from your web application, goes in a big old Excel spreadsheet. You don't want somebody to be able to come get that data. All right. So, and how you do that is you hack it ahead of time. You go ahead and figure out how did they, oh gosh, yeah, all you have to do right here is just penetrate from the user ID, and boom, we're in. Now I can access everything. Mm-hmm. You have to break it ahead of time. And so, talking about security, I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to look around and understand from a cybersecurity standpoint, it's a big deal. You need to go ahead and do that ahead of time. And if you're not, it's to your own demise.
Yeah. So another thing that seems to be common, and this came in as a question as well, just asking how we handle this with our process, is that software companies leave the responsibility of hosting the software to the client. So they have a software build, and then they say, okay, well, this has to be hosted somewhere. Mm-hmm. So it seems that the software companies either do not have in-house operations or a deployment team, or that they do not know what is the best hosting platform. So in our example, with HIPAA and HIPAA compliance, and I know a lot of people who may watch this or that we do business with are in the insurance industry, so HIPAA is super important, and it matters where and how you host. Yes. Can you speak to our ability to kind of talk through that with our client?
Well, a lot of people will say, let's just put it out on Amazon AWS. Mm-hmm. That doesn't work so well. They do have HIPAA-based security. Our experience has been that every time we've looked at it, it's very expensive, or it requires a lot of expertise because there's certain servers there. You're having to check these logs and make sure they're not being hacked. You have to update these servers. And to us, I mean, my whole thing is, if you built the company correctly from an entrepreneurial standpoint, that shouldn't be necessary. You should be able to just pay somebody to do that. Now, if you're a massive organization, you got your own staff and stuff to do that, you knock yourself out. That's not what has ever been my level of focus, because I am ultimately about being nimble and profitable. If you want to bring that stuff in-house and do it, okay, that's fine. But it's just foolish to think about, just think from the people that we work with, because a lot of stuff that the conversations we're having is almost new startup type of stuff. They don't have existing infrastructure. A lot of times this is their first rodeo. It's the first time they've ever developed software. You better be talking to them about how to actually make it work. It was like, no, we're going to develop it. Here you go. Well, what do I do with this? Mm-hmm. You have to walk them through the entire thing. And so, I mean, that's, again, even I was thinking as you were talking about that, even when you're developing software, understanding when you're creating an administrative problem for somebody, there's very commonly that you'll look at a certain function that I'll go, they'll go, well, no, that'll work fine. That'll work fine. The client can put this data in, and then our staff can just take it. Well, no, we'll just use a manual process. No, that's a terrible idea. So what you just did was you just hired a person. You just structured your software, so you just hired an extra person.
Because there wasn't a proper export, or it wasn't automated a certain way. You just added to your fixed cost.
That's exactly right. And other people just shell right past it. Whoa. You just spent $65,000 a year. And that's assuming the person shows up and that you don't have to fire them and hire somebody else, and that there's going to be disciplinary issues eventually. You have to buy that person benefits. You just spent a lot of money. Just take the extra time and figure out how to solve the problem, or go upstream and figure out how to more streamline it. It's a big deal. And what is that worth? It's worth a ton. And like from our perspective, well, how do you know that you know how to do it? Well, you look around, all right, we've been able to develop extremely efficient software that makes us quite profitable.
Yeah, exactly. So coming back from an entrepreneurial perspective, what I hear is when you say, okay, $65,000 for an employee, I automatically go, okay, that's $65,000 that come directly out of the profits,
Correct.
which has a multiplier,
Right.
which affects my company's valuation.
Correct.
So it's 65,000 times 8, 9,
Right.
10, or
Right.
we're in a technology space, could be 12, 13.
Right. So whenever we sell this thing, that decision just cost me $500,000.
Yes, easily. When it didn't have to, you could have fixed it right now.
That's exactly right.
And again, I think that's just another thing that stands out to me as far as how our brains think from an entrepreneurial perspective, saying, let's look at what your company's going to be worth as a result of this.
Now, and think about that. Okay. So now we're going past the initial we discovered with you, like what your software idea is. We try to talk you out of it.
Right.
And tried to help you understand what was going to be required, that if you really wanted to go down this road, what the financial commitment's likely going to be, that it's not going to be overnight, that you're going to run into roadblocks, that you're going to, have that one situation where you think your software is going to be done in April. And then, you start, it's like you're digging a gas line. You realize you got some bodies down there. You got to move those bodies first. And so now you're 3 months later. You have to get to where once you have gotten that in your head, then we go on to the whole specs. We were talking about building out the specs. That's when all that stuff happens up front. And it's more expensive. Why? Because you're not cheap and I'm not cheap. And, for people who have been entrepreneurial, but in the long run, oh my gosh, is it cheaper? Little bit more expensive on the front end, but not a lot. It's still not as expensive as what most people charge.
Sure.
But it's just a different approach.
Well, here's another thing that matters a lot. It certainly matters to us. Some companies may include this in their quality assurance. Some may not. But let's talk about performance testing. I've understood that from individuals who have gone and gone different routes with different software developers, that the whole performance testing step could be something that's kind of done on the back end, only after the client complains, hey, this thing it's slow, it's glitchy, and then it becomes a separate line item. How do we handle that whole performance testing piece?
Well, first of all, it's a great question to ask and to bring up, along with security. And all these things are things that we bring up when we're debating somebody. How about this? We're going to have to think, because they haven't thought about it. Well, we just build software and then it just works. No, it just works because you made it work. And, you have to understand those are the types of things. Now, my opinion on it is that I try to get people that we're working with to understand there's going to be bumps in the road, and this is going to be one of them. Okay, because you can hammer it down on day one. It depends on what your application is going to be. If you're distributing your app to 1 million people on day one, you're gonna have to do a whole bunch of work here. If it's a company that's going to launch day one and it's going to grow into it slowly, you have the ability to bring some clients on, just kind of like it's what I've done. I think it's worked really well, and to where you understand up front, you might have some user issues, or as you really start to ramp up and grow, you might have some user issues, but you can easily fix them at that point. And so that becomes also a question of, do you fix something that might be a problem down the road today, or do we try to get profitable today so that we have enough money to fix that thing down the road? I tend to be more conservative. So it's a both and. It's a very important thing, but only to a point. That's where you have to have an entrepreneurial brain that steps in, because if you ask a technology person, they're going to go, we have to do this. Yes, that's true. We have to. But, like our mentor talks about the janitor mindset and the CEO mindset. You have to have both, because the software developer is going to go have that janitor mindset. And a lot of times this has got to be cleaned up. This has got to be cleaned up, where the CEO goes, it does, but not just yet, because she has a broader view about what's happening overall. And so it's an important thing to look at, but you can't go crazy about it. Because the whole thing too that you mentioned earlier, he who's handy with a hammer thinks everything is a nail. Software people think everything is a software problem, but it's not.
Right.
Software, everyone is in the software business. The trash companies in this, everyone is. The post office, everyone's in the technology business. It's not like you don't have a smartphone. It's not like you don't have a computer. And so you kind of demystify it and you go, all right, well, it's, but don't use those skills just because if you're really good at that as a software person, you can really convince somebody to go off the edge on data security and cybersecurity. And it's important, But making it that way to where it even matters is important too. You can go hire 3 people to keep it secure and then go broke.
Right.
And so it's one of those things you really have to be very precise about growing into, unless you just got so much money you don't care.
Sure.
Yeah.
So let's speak on this, and I know we'll close out here soon. Once you have, let's just say the client, we've gone through the entire process.
Yeah.
We've built the software. We've done quality testing. We figured out hosting, right? We have a completed piece of software.
Right.
Well, is that the best time to start thinking about branding, marketing, distribution of your product?
That's going to be depending on who you ask. Me, resounding, absolutely not. No. I mean, and I even go a little bit more aggressive than that, as you well know. I think along the way, if your application allows for it, you need to be bringing people along, which is throwing it out there a little bit. And depending upon that, you got to be careful. And this is a recipe right here where you can bomb the recipe. I really like to bring some people on slowly, give them a financial incentive to do it. You're marketing the fact that you have more robust capabilities coming, but you have this and you begin to grow into it, because you have to get users on the system fast, because what you're going to find out is what you thought was right is not right. And they're going to figure it out for you. And people who are super passionate about it, you don't want a casual user. You want the person that's going to push you and to push, what if it did? Oh yeah, this would be great. Because those people are really critical to being successful. And so you want to bring them on. You want to be marketing the whole time. You don't want to be lying. You can't lie, right? I'm not going to help anybody lie. But, it's okay to talk about things that are going to be there, and vision that you have to be there, and functionality that's not quite there yet, and help people understand it. So, but it has to be a constant, continuous thing, because the last thing in the world you want to do is get to the end, but because this can happen. Mm-hmm. The reason I know is because this happened to us, right? So you come along and you start marketing something, realize the market's not ready for it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're 150 grand in. What are you going to do? I'm going to stop immediately and put it on the shelf and pick it back up again later, because finishing it and spending the other X amount of dollars and getting to the end and not being able to make sales doesn't prove a point.
Right. Right.
It just proves the point that you should have stopped when you knew that it wasn't going to work. Mm-hmm. And by having users and marketing, you can figure that out ahead of time. I mean, I see these people all the time. You see them. They built an entire piece of software and they can't sell it. How in the hell did they let that happen? You can't let that happen. People, it's money, right? Warren Buffett's 2 rules, right, for money. Rule number 1, don't lose money. Rule number 2 is what? Pay attention to rule number 1.
Yeah, refer back to rule number 1.
Exactly.
Don't lose money.
Don't lose money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you have to be doing it the whole time.
Yeah, absolutely. So someone wants to get started in the process. Someone wants to have a conversation with us. And they say, I have an idea. Or, we see all kinds, right? People come from various backgrounds. They may have had some experience. They may have had a bad experience. They may have had a great experience, but they want to save money. We're not a discount solution. I want to make that clear.
Right.
We're just really good at what we do. And because it was our money, when we learned, because it was our money, we found a cheaper way to do this.
That's
we can
right.
pass that savings on, plus a level of expertise, and we know how to distribute a product.
Right.
And we're focused on profitability.
Right.
But if someone comes through and they like what they're hearing, how do they get started? Who do they contact? What's the next step?
Okay. They contact us at Sky Insurance Technologies. And really what we're going to do is we're going to kind of discover what it is that they're talking about. We're going to set really good, clear expectations. We're going to help them understand that this is not like a unlimited pool of knowledge that just helps you bounce ideas off, and we just talk and we get excited and then we just do it over and over again, because we don't get paid to do that. But as depending upon the size of that, we bring the right resources in pretty short order, a few hours, handful of hours. We grab it, we get our arms around what's really required here, and then we set really good expectations. Can't talk you out of it. We have a brainstorming session with our team and with them to figure out, okay, we need to take this thing forward, move forward. Then it's going to be about what we like to refer to as the most important step. that's when they write us a check to get started.
That's right.
Because, and then that becomes a deposit, right? To depending upon the scope of it. And the goal of that would be to be able to fully develop the specifications. So again, it's going to cost money to even figure out exactly, no different than it would cost to build plans from an architect. It's going to take that. And then you just continue to go forward from there.
Yeah. So that contact information's on the screen right now. Mark's contact information as well as my contact information. So just shoot us an email. We can schedule a time to have that initial call, and really, what's said during that call is going to determine.
That's right.
What happens next.
And you said that we see all kinds. Were you referring to the people we work with on a daily basis?
Well, I'm talking about the guy in the mirror.
Oh, God. Yeah, I know, right? I just wish he would stay the same. That would be great.
If it didn't change so much. Right. That's exactly right. Well, this was fun, man.
I know. I appreciate it.
Good. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
That's it.
Perfect.